Hello, world, and specifically Athens. I want to set the table. It's the 1st of June and it's morning time, so you might see me sipping my coffee. And the political climate is as hot as the weather has been. And the mayoral election here in Athens is in a runoff. And I have the honor to be here with candidate Tim Denson. And if you're unfamiliar, my name is Cassie Chantel. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I've been having a long day of campaigning already. It's only 10:40, but I've been doing it for a while already.
Wow. And it's like your birthday or something, right?
So Saturday is my birthday, but we're gonna be having a little campaign birthday party tonight. Yeah.
Okay, so first point of order, how do you defend being a Gemini?
Hey, I'm I'm proud. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I meet other Geminis. I think they're cool people. I don't know. What's your sign, Cassie?
I'm a Cancer, so I'm like right
All right.
behind you. So I'm
Okay.
gearing up for a birthday too. Yeah. So I want this conversation, we're obviously going to talk politics, but I want it to be as people friendly as possible. So if we were just having this conversation and we were just kicking it and talking about the state of Athens, where would you take me? Where would this conversation be held? What type of place?
Man, probably in one of my favorite coffee shops. It's that's one of my biggest vices is good coffee. I love some Thousand Faces, some sips. I was over at Sunroof Coffee this morning, sitting outside since it's kind of nice out. Um, and yeah, I mean, I one of the things I love so much about Athens is that it has I think a unique style, and that style especially comes through in not only like the arts and stuff, but also in like the small businesses that are here, the restaurants, the coffee shops, the venues. Everybody has their extra little thing here, and I absolutely love that. It's one of the things that I can usually go buy things and go to services here in Athens without having even to go to like a giant corporate thing because there's just so many cool, interesting places here in Athens, Georgia.
So I'm hearing that you like the small businesses, kind of indie scene. Is that consistent with who you've been? Like, what kind of kid were you in high school?
Yeah, I was one of the skate punks in high school. I was on the football team my freshman year, and I quit so I could go start skating with all my friends. 'Cause I discovered skating and like punk music, and that really led me into um, focusing on DIY, just do it yourself kind of styles, and that's been a huge part of me as a person. I grew up after high school and through college and stuff, started playing in like a lot of DIY music scenes. Toured around the country for a number of years as a touring musician, playing house shows, DIY venues, legit venues all across the country also. But always like me and my friends recording our own albums, setting up our own recording studios, making our own art and own packaging for our albums and stuff. And that's gone into every other part of my life too. I love making things with my hands. I love being creative. Um, and that's one of the reasons I love Athens because I think Athens is really built around that kind of mindset also.
I get that. People see me talking politics and they're like confused because my stage on social media is basketball or music. So for me, I started out in student government and was a student body president. What was your first political action?
Ooh, that's a good question. What was my first political action? Um, it wasn't like specifically political, I guess, but like and I've talked about this a lot. My parents were preachers, and so I grew up while they had kind of technically conservative politics, they were very focused on like serving people, and they had like a street outreach program that they did in the church. So I definitely grew up like volunteering at soup kitchens and going into homeless shelters and volunteering there and having those who are unhoused even sleep at our house on our couch and stuff. And so that was something a way that we kind of grew up. I'd say personally, like when I think of like actual politics, I had an amazing American government teacher in 11th grade, Mr. Fairchild. He was absolutely fantastic, and he really kind of turned me on to, I think, what government's supposed to be, and not necessarily always is, but what it's supposed to be, and made me think about things differently. And so, like, my first election was the 2000 presidential election. I voted for Ralph Nader. I voted Green Party. I've always been, I guess, a little to the left, and wanting to choose people who are really going to put uh, the people first. But I guess the first like real thing that I think speaks to the direction I ended up going was whenever I was in college in Fort Myers, Florida, and I was leaving work, and I was driving down like the main highway there in Fort Myers, on Tamiami Trail, and outside of Taco Bell, there was a Taco Bell on the right hand side, and I was driving by, and there was people outside protesting and had like puppets and stuff, like these giant puppets and everything in these signs. And I was sitting at the light, like watching this, and like, what is going on? It was a very different kind of protest I'd seen, So I pulled in there and I talked to the folks, and it was the coalition of Immokalee workers. And so Immokalee was a town that was very close by in the kind of region I grew up in, and a very agricultural town. And it had a lot of immigrant farm workers who would work there. And they were really getting abused and not respected, not getting the pay they needed and supports they needed. So they had basically unionized, and they were asking for 1 extra penny per pound of tomatoes that they sold. And they were asking for different restaurants and grocery stores to sign on to this pledge that they would pay 1 extra penny on every pound of tomatoes they sold, and that penny would go to paying for healthcare costs, child care costs, education costs for the families of these workers who were picking these tomatoes. And I was like, what a humble, easy ask, and how shocking is it that I'm talking to these folks that like Taco Bell is refusing to pay this 1 extra penny to go towards this, and so like I stopped eating it. They were asking people to boycott Taco Bell, so I stopped eating Taco Bell. I was like, all right, that's an easy thing for me to do. And thankfully that I followed that organization. They're still around. I was very proud that I guess it was probably like in 2016, the Coalition of Molecular Workers came here to Athens and did a co-event with Athens for Everyone, because at that point, that's the great thing, it worked. Taco Bell signed on. Taco Bell started paying that penny finally. Took years. As did a bunch of other places, but now it was Wendy's was refusing to. And so they came here. We did a documentary showing with some of the organizers here. We had a protest in front of Wendy's. I still haven't eaten at Wendy's since. I urge everybody else not to eat at Wendy's until they pay that 1 cent penny for these workers. And so that was just, I really remember that moment, and it showed that collective action, right? That if we come together, we can bring about change that can help people, because it was just so, their protest was so direct, it was so immediate, it had a specific ask, and they had great tactics around it, and it was successful. So that's a little tiny thing that has really stuck with me over all these years.
Yeah, honestly, that's a great cause and a great story. And it kind of segues to today. So, today, from what I understand, you serve the unhoused community. And you said that 70% of the unhoused community are Athenians, which is a night and day contrast from the information that's out there. Like, people are coming into Athens and dropping people off. So, I'm interested to know, where do you get those numbers? And from your perspective, what do you understand about homelessness that people may get wrong?
Sure. So those numbers come from like kind of two different places. One is that every community really that has a homeless service provider network, called a continuum of care, is required to do what they call a point in time count, sometimes called a PIT count. And that point in time count means that the folks in the community are supposed to go out and try to get a survey, a count of how many people are experiencing homelessness in that community within a specific 24-hour period. And you have to do it in the month of January. So we do that every single year. I've volunteered for the last 4 or 5 years to be a part of it. So we go out to different shelters, different soup kitchens. We go out into the woods where we know there's camps happening. We go to parking lots like Walmart's where we know people are sleeping in their cars in those places. And we try to do these surveys and get these counts and get the data on who is experiencing homelessness at this time. And one of the questions is like, how long have you lived in this community that you're in now? So that's one of the ways that we find that information. The other one is that the continuum of care now has a coordinated entry assessment tool that where we do direct interviews with folks who are unhoused and get them put into waiting lists for all of the housing programs that are available here in Athens. It's actually a really big step forward because in the past, while Advantage would have housing programs, while Family Promise would have housing programs, and the Athens Homeless Shelter have housing programs, you had to kind of go to all those different places and apply separately at all of them, which is a huge barrier, and it's a lot of work. People would have to go through the same process over and over again for each program they're trying to apply for. So now we have this new coordinated entry program where you can go and you can do the one assessment, and it gets you put on the list for all of the different possible programs, and then we're able to prioritize who has the most immediate needs to be able to go into those programs. And so we also now are able to get data through that tool also, which we're able to do year round. And I honestly think is a more accurate tool, to be honest, because again, it's not done in that 24-hour period. And that assessment tool is done by tons of agencies. Churches are able to do it. The police department has that tool, so they can do it. The hospitals can do it when somebody comes into the hospital. So I think it's a much more accurate way to get that information. And and it definitely it directly does push back on this narrative of the folks who are experiencing homelessness here, like you said, are being dropped off, coming from who knows where. The vast majority of these folks are our neighbors. They are Athenians. And therefore, it is definitely our responsibility to take care of our neighbors that we supposedly love and want to take care of. And while there might be a small percentage of folks who come in from other areas who also just need help, I'm fine that we might help some folks every once in a while from somewhere else while we're taking on this very important need of helping the people who live here now.
So you've had to deal with homelessness like head on when you were a commissioner. You had a first step sanction encampment, and that was a situation that showed your compassion, but the outcome is a bit complicated. So, can you tell us more about that initiative and what the problem was that you were facing in that moment that you were trying to solve with that initiative?
Yeah. Thanks, Cassie. I think complicated is definitely. I think that's the way to answer that too. Uh, I don't I know some people say like, oh, that was like a failed project, or like it wasn't, because I was going into that after I wasn't a commission anymore. I was going to that shelter every single Friday as part of my job to get folks into housing, and we got a lot of folks that were moved into housing and stabilized and got them jobs, got them health insurance, some of them back, got their GEDs, because they were able to come to that encampment, get stabilized, and be able to reach those resources. So in those ways, it was a success. But I think that success, unfortunately, was made a lot really murky with some of the drama, I think, that was associated with that whole thing. And it never got fully realized in what I hoped it was going to be, which was to start out as a sanctioned encampment, but then move on to more permanent structures of having like tiny houses, or more permanent things where people weren't having to stay in tents there. We never got to that point because of all of that drama. Um, all of that being said, we still need something like that. That the first step encampment, that whole thing, it really was an attempt to create this missing link we need if we're going to move people from homelessness into housing, because we need folks to be, it's a housing first model. We need folks to be stabilized and accessible by the service providers for us to really give those folks the support they need to get housed. Because it's so difficult for a person, somebody will say like, well, they just need to go get a job. And I was talking with some formerly in-house folks just this week about this, and they're like, yeah, people tell us to go get a job, but it's so hard to get a job whenever you're living out of a tent, you don't have the internet, you don't have a computer, you have to go to the library to check your email when you can. um, you can't show up, it's hard to get a shower, it's hard to have clean clothes that smell nice whenever you have to go to an interview. It's so hard, your phone might get cut off because you don't have a reliable telephone phone service, and you don't get that callback number. Like, there's so many barriers there to help that are hard for people to dig themselves out. While if we have this kind of missing step, like I said, that's kind of in between what an emergency shelter is, but getting into a housing program. We need some folks just to have that place to go to where they can start to get their life put together while they enter those housing programs and apply for them, while they apply for disability, while they are applying for jobs. And so I still think that we need that. We need something that's going to be more than just a sanctioned encampment, but it's going to be more like what the people have done in like Austin, Texas, with creating a tiny home village. I think something like that would really be a much better alternative, and I think it's something that's still possible.
So, kind of moving into an accountability space, from what I understand, ACC staff warned that Athens Alliance Coalition was a high risk recipient of the federal funds. Looking back, what would you have done differently, or if anything, in regards to bringing the initiative to fruition?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Again, I don't really have regrets because it did help so many people. I guess what I would have liked to see do differently, or at least for us to try, because I know the county staff did try, would be to try to work with the organization that was running that to get more structure and more stability within their board and their staff while that was going on. That kind of help did finally, we did try to do that, but it was kind of, at that point, it was almost kind of too late. Things have already started unraveling. So I guess from the very beginning, I wish that we had put in those extra supports. And I also wish, I mean, to be honest, Cassie, I wish that some of the more stable and respected nonprofits in town had applied. That was a disappointment to me, that we did have a lot of organizations who already did some kind of this work and similar work, and they didn't apply for it. And I don't know if that was because they didn't believe in it, or if they thought it was too risky, or what it is, and that just, I think if we were to do this again, I think we would see more of those organizations step up, because we've done a lot of work with that, like with the Homeless Coalition coming together and really helping to get a lot of the organizations who focus on homelessness more aware of what's going on, more aware that the needs are. But that's another thing I wish that had gone differently. Yeah.
So, moving into housing, Athens is in what we call a housing crisis. You've been pushing density and overlay districts. Can you break down that concept in simpler terms for someone who may not understand what that means? And why isn't single family homes a strong solution, in your opinion?
Sure. So first, I would say single family homes is part of the solution, um, but single family homes is also kind of the most expensive type of housing there is. Um, and so, I can even speak to myself. I do. My family does now own our own home. I honestly, I never thought I would be at a place I was. Whenever I was a kid, my parents never owned their own homes. Um, but I never would have been able to get to this point if I didn't have affordable housing options. I mean, I was raising money working at Barnes and Noble in retail, just trying desperately to put money together. And my wife was working at a t-shirt printing company. We're just, trying to patch together things and get by. There was many, many years of you know of of negative checking accounts and scraping by whatever I could for food to get to the point. And I never would have been able to if I hadn't had a lot of affordable housing options that came up through. When I first moved here to Athens, I was living with like three other roommates, and we were paying like 225 a piece for a house in normal town, which was like insane. There's no way you could do that now. Um, so we need to get back to having a myriad of affordable options and a lot of different kinds of housing options. So when I talk about the density, it's a lot of it's around also another term called missing middle that I think people have heard sometimes. That right now, what we have being built here in Athens is really two types of housing: single family, and which again, like I said, is the most expensive type of housing to build and to buy, and then really super dense student housing downtown, large apartment buildings, um, and that's really the two types. There's not a lot in between. Now, back in the past, there was a lot more times you'd have duplexes being built, triplexes, quadplexes, townhomes, what they call cottage courts, where you have smaller homes kind of built on a lot that kind of face in each other and have some of their own yardage, but also like share some of their yardage. Like those smaller kind of apartment complexes that we still see a little bit of, but they haven't really been built from like since the 70s. Those kind of things are not being built right now. And honestly, in a lot of parts of Athens, it's illegal to build them because of our zoning code. And because of that, again, so what we're encouraging to be built is really only those two types: really dense luxury housing, apartments, and single family homes. So we've had a study done that identified the parts of town that would be what they think is best suited for that missing middle kind of things that I just like went over that list, because they are in walking distance to grocery stores, pharmacies, job centers, because they're on the transit line, because we have a lot of the infrastructure that we would need to have that extra density built there. And so those places are like, in Normal Town, on Oglethorpe, in Five Points, out on Millage, North Avenue, some of those places that again like already have some of that the infrastructure that's needed there. And by doing that and diversifying the types of housing we have, all of those types of housing, that missing middle, they are historically much cheaper options than a single family home. And the idea is by doing that, not only are you going to have those options be more affordable, but eventually you'll have even the prices of single family homes come down too, because there's less people competing for that type of housing because there's now a larger variety to choose from. So that when I'm talking about, and also one last point on it, like I said about the infrastructure, we had this company come in that does a lot of this kind of housing and housing infrastructure analysis, and they came and did an analysis for our entire county. And one of the things they're talking about is that it costs so much less money to offer the infrastructure we need, like water, sewer, roads, sidewalks, to areas that are more dense like that. While if we are continuing just to really focus only on single family housing, that requires us to have to keep spreading out and doing sprawl, which is actually much more expensive to send water lines and sewer lines and roads and sidewalks out farther and farther on the edges of the community. That ends up having a larger cost for the entire community too.
So, if you're still listening to the podcast, thank you so much. I wanted to use this time to let you know that I will also be interviewing Dexter Fisher. So, please like and subscribe so you'll get that alert when that interview drops. I'll also be doing other interviews with people in the community that are involved in local politics in some capacity so we can continue this conversation. I also want to use this time to shout out some sources because I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of listening in order to prepare myself to have this conversation. Shout out to the Athens Banner Herald, the Flagpole. Those are the major news sources. Also, Red&Black. The major local news sources have done a good job at documenting for the most part. I also want to shout out an independent news source, Athens Political Nerd. They've actually been one of the key sources in me watching the debates, because if I haven't been able to go to them live or go to the town hall live, Athens Political Nerd has recorded these debates, and that's just good for record keeping. So shout out to them for that. Shout out to AvChat for putting together some of these debates and having this platform for the candidates to share their message. Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement has also hosted some town halls, and Mocha Johnson, who's one of the founders of the movement, interviewed some candidates as well, and I was able to watch those interviews, so thank you to them. And then also Imani Scott Blackwell has a Substack that I think is unique because it brings an intellectual side to the conversation. So if you're interested in any of these sources, please look into the description of this video and I'll have links there. But thank you for again for listening, and please enjoy the rest of the interview. So I want to talk about when you were the commissioner in the Nottingham and Oglethorpe Avenue development. Uh, this was strongly opposed, from what I understand, by the residents of Nottingham when it came to, they were warning that the rezoning could increase market pressure in a historically Black neighborhood. So this becomes a concern with how you're able to hear the people that are directly being impacted. So, but could you tell us more about the project, what you remember, and why you supported it at the time?
Sure. So it was a old historic house on Oglethorpe Avenue, just about a half a block away from Oglethorpe Avenue Elementary School. And the idea was it's this one big, people have driven by it. It's a pretty big piece of land, and it has this one big squarish stone house that's there, two-story stone house. And the idea was to build an identical stone house next to it, and then a series of basically tiny homes behind it. I think it was about 6 or 8 tiny homes behind it, making a bit of a cottage court with, and then turning those two square buildings into quadplexes. So there would be 4 apartments in each one of those buildings. So it would be 4, 8. It was going to be about 18 or so units. Um, and there were some people who were against it. I definitely wouldn't say it was. There was definitely also people who were completely for it. I actually knocked on every single door in the Nottingham district, every single one, and also held 2 town halls with it that I invited everybody into to come to. And so there were some people who were opposed to it, and there was definitely a lot of people who were for it. A lot of people who were just like, "Hey, it sounds interesting." Don't really have an opinion on it. But again, this is that kind of missing middle uh, kind of building that we have been shown would help bring down housing costs. Now, and here's the thing too. The way it was done with a what you call a planned development, which is how I would always like to go, which means we would not have been just changing the zoning on that parcel so that, some people were afraid that we were going to change that and that they were going to build, instead of what was being presented, instead they would build a big student, apartment complex. There'd be like a 6-story apartment building or something like that. But the way we went about it was creating a planned development, which means the only thing that could be built there, the only thing legally that could be built there would be that very specific design. And if they wanted to make any changes, they'd have to come back to the commission and ask for changes, every single change they do. And so if it had been just a zoning change, I wouldn't have supported it, because they could have just built something crazy that could have been really harmful to that community. But with the protections that were in there, they were going to be putting in, they agreed to put in privacy fencing and tree lines all the way around it so that there would be no extra noise. They listened to the community and changed the way that the egress and ingress, the driveways were going to be for coming into it. So I think I still stand by that it was a good project. Yeah, there definitely were some people who were against it. But honestly, that kind of happens almost every single time, especially if you're talking about doing a development. You're never going to have anybody that's just completely happy. Right across the street is another planned development that's now being changed that backs up to Forest Heights. Kind of a similar situation there. Now they are trying to get the planned development changed to a senior housing one there too. But that I'll be honest, like, growth and change is hard. It's hard for all of us. It really is. And I am an advocate for density and for missing middle, to have that diversity of housing, but I want to do it in a smart way. I do always want to be listening to the community. Honestly, the developers on that one, like I said, they held so many town halls. did the canvassing, went out in there. I want us to have those kind of approaches. You might not have everybody be happy at the end of the day, but at least we can try to make sure that we're making projects that are going to fit with those communities the best that they possibly can, while we're also still ensuring that we are tackling this housing crisis.
So from what I understand is there were precautions that were in place, or you just wouldn't have signed on something that would have brought in student housing. So you're saying that you were aware that people were feeling that way, but you wouldn't have signed off if it had have meant that.
But yeah, definitely not. Like I said, like this was a very curated, specially designed. Like, and it was also, I mean, they put in places where they were going to do, uh, they were only going to do long-term leases or ownership, so that they could ensure that students weren't going to move into this. This wasn't going to become a bunch of UJ undergrads. This housing was designed specifically for like teachers and for people who were in the medical field and nearby medical offices and stuff. Like that's who they were trying to get to come in there. Now, the sad thing, this is something that happens all the time too, right? Like that hasn't been built. Like not even a step has happened there. And this also shows just like how difficult it is to tackle these things, because it's really hard to get good developers to come through. And also, yeah, that's another thing. All of the people behind that ownership group who were developing it, all of them lived here in Athens, Georgia, too, which I think is another thing. Like these were people who live in our community, who were at the town halls talking to people, and those are the kind of developments that I want to be working on and encouraging, because those people don't want to screw up their own community. We do get folks who like fly in from. I mean, I remember, I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to get in trouble or any kind of lawsuits against us here. But there were some like developers. I remember specifically from Chicago, really really big ones who were flying in trying to cram a development that just wasn't going to fit into an area here in Athens, and we kind of just weren't willing to work with them in the same kind of way, because they weren't going to work with us the way that we needed them to.
So this kind of moves into the conversation about your campaign and how people are experiencing your campaign, because you're leaning heavily on fare free transit. That's something that you've already accomplished while being a commissioner, living wages for ACC Gov employees, eviction prevention, inclusionary zoning, cash bail reform, and affordable housing. And those policies are like common sense things. Like I think we all can agree on those are good things. But when we hear things like Athens for everyone, it is a powerful piece of language and it's a high standard. So when we're looking at your campaign, I'm just gonna be honest, like I'm looking at your Instagram and I don't see a lot of everyone in the campaign and what it looks like. And I think that for someone, I would consider you progressive. Would you consider yourself progressive?
Yeah, definitely.
So one of the downfalls, in my opinion, with progressive movements is that the diversity piece isn't always there when it comes to the visuals with the messaging, because I can look at conservative campaigns who actually have that part down packed. There's diversity in the conservative campaign. So when you get this feedback, is this the first time that you've heard that your Athens for everyone doesn't represent everyone? And what do you do when you hear that feedback?
Yeah, I mean, so it's definitely something, right? It's something to aspire to. Is my idea. And yeah, I definitely agree that one of the difficulties being, a cis white male is that it's harder to earn the trust of communities that have historically faced oppression from cis white males. And I understand that, and that puts the onus and responsibility on me to be aware of that, and be aware of that I have to constantly be working and aware of it, but working to broaden that, and just always be working with the understanding there's unintentional bias that's built into there, and again the history that comes with it. And so the way I try to deal with it is just it's always a work in progress, always, and it's always going to be. There's never a time that I'm going to achieve a point where I have done enough reaching out to minority communities or done enough for minority communities or anything like that. This is going to be something that if I'm holding true to my beliefs of wanting to have an Athens for everyone, holding true to my beliefs that I want a world that truly is equitable and gives all people a fair shot, that I'm always going to have to be working to try to earn the trust of Black and Brown communities, and also just knowing that like some some people in those communities aren't going to trust me, and for good reason, right? Not necessarily something that I've done, but that something that people that look like me have done. And I can't get upset about that. I can't get mad about that. I just have to be aware of it and acknowledge it and try to do better. Um, and it's it's that's a big thing, and it's I am definitely always aware of it. If I'm elected as mayor, I'm always going to be aware of it. And like I said, it's something that I'm never going to finish doing. It's something that's always going to have to work on and try to constantly be better at and be aware of.
I think it's one of those things where it sounds more complicated than maybe it is. I think when I talked about politics in just regular spaces like the barbershop or whatever, I'm getting the vibe that people just don't know you. And it could just be a simple, you just go into the barbershop and you just talk to people.
Sure.
Like, so are those some of the things like when you write down like your goals and you want to make a intentional effort to bridge these gaps between the Black community, other minority communities, like what is the effort that you're making? Like what strides are you making to kind of close that gap?
I mean, the biggest thing that I've been doing personally, well, with the campaign, but also personally, has been just going and making sure that I'm knocking doors specifically in Black neighborhoods, Black communities, having conversations with folks right there in their doorway, letting them know that I'm coming to them. Like again, the responsibility and the onus is on me that I'm coming to them. Yeah, definitely. Also, yeah, just showing up in majority Black spaces, whether that be Black churches or yeah, going into to Wilson's barbershop like I've done and talking to folks and getting my haircut there. Just making sure that that is yeah, that again, like that responsibility is on me, going into Black owned restaurants, Black owned businesses, and trying to make sure that I'm uh, using them as a resource and supporting them as a business also, and making sure that that they're being seen there. Um, Making sure that I'm going on to Black media sources and making sure I'm doing ad buys on like WXAG and going on their shows just as much as I would be on some of the other like radio stations and stuff. And again, the big thing too is like not just that I'm doing this as somebody who's running for office campaigning, but that I would be doing that continuously if I'm elected as mayor too, which I did as a commissioner. I mean, I continued knocking on those doors and especially going into communities that had not been represented in the past. I'll continue to do that and hold town halls in those areas too.
So I want to get into governing with urgency versus the process because we've seen the government move slow. I think everybody knows that government is slow, but we've also seen the government move with urgency. I think that we could say the homeless encampment kind of moved quickly because there was a need there. I would say the real time crime center, although it started in 2015, it kind of moved quickly. How do you balance the need to act quickly with the need to slow down and listen when residents are raising concerns?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think that's one of the biggest hardest things to juggle and to balance out. You know, uh, yeah, I mean, I think at times we have moved too slow um, because of having because the government's scared to move forward. And sometimes it's done as an excuse, like, oh, we need to do another study or we need to get more public input. But really, what the person's saying is, I don't want to do this, but I'm also afraid to say no. And then there's times where you really do need to get all of that feedback, really, really big efforts. Um, but yeah, I would say that like during the pandemic, right, which is whenever the encampment happened, and a lot of other things, like we showed that the government can move with urgency a lot faster. I mean, when we created the Athens Eats program, where we were going to ensure that every single person who needed food delivered to them, we were going to deliver food to them, and we got that stood up amazingly fast, and we're having meals delivered all across the county in this really complex organizational structure that we had stood up within weeks. Um, so we show that we can get those things done when we need to. And so I do want us to look at like what our process looks like. Um, I think we should look at like what kind of things should we really be requiring to have public input and how many levels of public input, and what things should we be able to just be able to move forward on. Like, do we need to have 3 public input sessions to be able to build a new stretch of sidewalk on Vincent Drive? Like, I don't know if we do. Like, it might be better if we just take the steps to build the sidewalk on Vincent Drive, and so I want us to kind of relook at what we're doing and why things are getting delayed. Now, there's other stuff that I think we really do need to take the time with. Um, I, I mean, you brought up the real time crime center. Like, I think that was one also that we did rush into pretty fast and that we didn't actually think about as long as we needed to. Now all the concerns around flock cameras and stuff, and we just kind of smacked down and signed a contract and put those cameras up everywhere. And now people are realizing really what that means, what some of those implications are. I think that shows that we should have, in that case, slowed down and really informed the community better and got more community input.
Are you interested or have you already entertained other ways to accept public input? Because as I listened to the debates throughout this entire campaign, it sounds like everyone's not available to show up during these town halls or these commissioner meetings because of work. And a lot of the working class in Athens works multiple jobs. What other ways do you envision yourself, if elected, receiving public input?
So definitely, this holding town halls at different times of the day in actual communities. I do feel, I mean, like it was as a commissioner, like I said, I was really I really thought it was the wrong approach to expect people to come to us at City Hall, like again at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday night and have to find parking and all this kind of stuff, and also have to sit through a sometimes 3 4 hour meeting to be able to give input on something. um, I was like, weird, there's something missing there. And so that's whenever I put place, holding monthly town halls and holding those town halls in accessible places at like, school gymnasiums and coffee shops and churches and bars and just places that people gather. Even held some in a couple of just like public parks. We held one on the bus. We did one about like how the bus works, and we actually people just got on the bus and we had people. It was great. It was fantastic. And so if I'm elected as mayor, I will continue that. And like I said, having them in all the different districts, the different neighborhoods, different communities, and me coming to people, also making sure they're at diverse times, having some on the weekends, having some on weeknights after, but making sure that we are kind of making as many opportunities as possible. And also, a big thing on those town halls is that I don't like to have them like that super formal structure like we have at City Hall. How we'd always do it is we'd have a presentation on something like, all right, here's the budget. So we're going to talk about the budget, give a presentation, have some staff there, and then we just open it up to questions and dialogue so we can talk about things and people can have, an actual conversation about these things like we do as human beings. And so I feel like that makes things a lot more accessible, not only in me coming to people, but also more accessible because it presents the information in a more accessible kind of way. The other thing is I would like to be able to use, social media and technology in ways like this, like we're doing right now, to kind of help get the word out about things. I've enjoyed doing like Reddit AMAs. Actually, I saw the current mayor, did a Reddit AMA just a couple months ago, which I thought was interesting, just to be able to, get that kind of dialogue and information out those ways too. So I want to be creative and accessible, and then also, not be stuck in my ways. If people start presenting that there's other kind of interesting ways to do stuff, then I'll be very happy to change it and go that way. Oh, and also the last thing is, I want to have open office hours at City Hall, where I'll just have set times that I'm there at City Hall, and people can drop by if they have an issue going on or they want to talk or have questions, so that they can do that, in those open times that they can do at their own leisure.
So, leaning into doing things new ways, we've seen a lot of progress with New York's current mayor, and you've compared yourself to him in a short, fun way on social media. Uh, what I do appreciate about your campaign is that you are willing to talk about pushing Athens initiatives at the state level. You've talked about lobbying and not just accepting state restrictions as the end of the conversation. So, can you elaborate on the comparison between you and New York's current mayor? Because I know that they have a different way of doing things in New York compared to our unified government. So, let's start there and then we can keep going into this.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, definitely especially the state government structure is very different in Georgia than it is New York. It's much more. It's funny, right? That we supposedly fought this whole civil war for like states' rights and local rights, but the state of Georgia and a lot of southern states actually have a lot more restrictions on actual like local rights. But so that's one thing we have to deal with is Georgia has a lot of like we can't do rent control here. That is illegal to be done in Georgia at all. We can't set our own minimum wage here for our city. That's something you're not allowed to do in the state of Georgia. Those things are in New York. Your cities are able to do those kind of things. So what that means is that we have to be more creative. Is the way I look at it. So that's like getting back to like the inclusionary housing ordinance that I worked on is like we can't require developers to build a percentage of the units as affordable units, but we can incentivize them to enter into a contract guaranteeing they will by giving them little things they might want. So a lot of times we have to work with those incentive based things. So for instance, I want to create what I'm calling the Mayor's Living Wage Award, in which we will businesses and companies here in Athens will be able to present their HR documents just showing that all of the employees that they are paying a living wage, and by doing so, they could be certified as a mayor's living wage business that we will then help promote and push, have on the website. They'll be able to have their own like stickers they can put on the door and be able to promote it themselves on their stuff that they are a mayor's living wage business. And so we can do those kind of things to incentivize pay to go up for private businesses here. And like when it comes to rent and such, one of the things I want to do is create an office of tenant protections. Again, we can't force a lot of things, but we can still hold to those few laws and restrictions we do have for landlords. We can still make sure that they're at least going by that. And a lot of times we have landlords here that aren't. We have a lot of great landlords, but let's be honest, we also have plenty of slumlords here in Athens, Clark County too. I mean, with my job, I remember us having we found out that some of our tenants that we had gotten put into a housing program who were previously homeless, that this was a large complex, the entire complex, everybody who lived there had been presented a notice on their door saying that their water was going to be cut off. And everybody was shocked because they're like, well, we pay our water to the property manager. We don't pay the county. So why is the county putting? And it turns out that the property management company just hadn't been paying the water bill for months until it was tens and tens of thousands of dollars. And who was going to face the repercussions of that was going to be those tenants. That is illegal, and it was going on for a long time. And it was way too difficult for us to get that fixed. And the crazy thing is that property management company did it twice in a year. So I want to have a Office of Tenant Protections that has a hotline where people can be calling in to report those kind of things, and then we can connect them to resources, or in situations like that, investigate what's happening so that we can make sure that we're fixing those things and that the landlords are being held accountable. So that's that. I bring up like we're just gonna have to be a little bit more creative to find workarounds those state restrictions that we have. But I feel confident that if we really prioritize that taking care of the people here in Athens is a priority, if that's really a priority for us, we can find a way to do these things.
One of the things that New York's mayor did that I found was interesting was while he was campaigning, he said things like, I'm going to be Trump's worst nightmare. But then in one of his first initiatives, he went to the White House and sat down with Donald Trump. So when you're in this type of business, and I would say in any line of work, relationships are a thing. We can say that there are sitting commissioners that aren't your biggest fan. How do you go about navigating relationships in a mayoral seat? And what can you say about your relationships with stakeholders at this point?
Yeah, I'm just always gonna try. And honestly, if there was like one slogan in my life, it is that like I'm always going to try. I'm gonna reach out to those folks. I know on Commissioner Allison Wright has made it very public that she is not a fan of mine, and that's fine. That's her prerogative. But I can tell you this: I after I win, I am going to ask Commissioner Wright to please sit down with me so we can talk and try to find a way to work through whatever those issues are, because that's going to be best not only for Athens but for her constituents, right? Her constituents don't want her to have a antagonistic relationship with the mayor. I don't want to have an antagonistic relationship with Commissioner Wright. That's not going to be a fun way to do things. It's not going to be helpful. Um, I am I don't take things personally. I have I always have a notion like to have no enemies because I don't think it helps you at all. Um, and so my door is always going to be open, but not always going to be open. I'm going to be making the invites to sit down. Same thing with our state legislators. I have man, but no, I have been in Senator Bill Cowsert, Senator Frank Ginn, Houston Gaines. I have been in their offices so many times at the state capitol over the years to go down and sit down with them and to talk to them about the needs of Athens. And some things we drastically see differently, but some things we do agree on. Again, the one of the things was I when I was on the commission, I pushed to have a low income homestead exemption created, which had never been created anywhere in the state of Georgia. That would be based on people's income, so that any family, any homeowner that was at 200% of the federal poverty level or lower, their property taxes would be frozen in place, so their property taxes couldn't go up. Nobody had ever created a low income homestead exemption before. And so I worked with Representative Spencer Fry and got it. I got a resolution passed unanimously. Commissioner Wright voted for it at City Hall, and Spencer Fry pushed it at the state legislature. And it did take a few years, but Houston Gaines and Bill Cowsert and Frank Ginn, all of them voted for it. And I went to those offices begging them to take this up and trying to make the argument of how this was going to help people and how it would look good for them, just like it would look good for us. And so, it might not work every time, but I can tell you this: we're never going to have a policy fail here in Athens if I'm mayor because of a lack of trying to talk to people and reach out to them. That's never going to happen. That's always something I'm very willing to do. And that's never going to be one of the barriers.
So, as we bring this conversation to a close, what do you want to say to voters who like your policies but still have concerns about whether your campaign fully sees them?
Um, that's a great question. I'm again, I'm gonna try. And if there is somebody like I please reach out to me however you want if you have any of those concerns. Obviously my website, timforathens.com. Contact, or you just email me at timmdenson@gmail.com. That's my personal email. My telephone number is 706-372-0681. Give me a call, send me a text, send me an email. If you want to sit down for coffee, you want to get a beer, let me know. You want to just sit on my porch so we can talk, or go down to, walk around Memorial Park or something like that? Happy to do that, because again, I want to be as accessible as possible. And I know that not only is part of the job of campaigning, part of that me trying to earn people's trust, but my job, if I'm mayor, part of my job is to try to keep earning people's trust. And again, I understand if people look at me and say, like, I don't know, I'm not sure if this guy looks like the kind of guy that's going to be there for me. I've tried to have a track record and a history that shows that I am trying, and I can guarantee that I will continue to. But I want to be held accountable. I want to be accessible so people can reach out to me, and I'm definitely want to be a mayor for all people, and that goes for people even on the other side of the political spectrum. I know there's a lot of people who have concerns like, oh well, Tim's not going to be a mayor for Republicans. That's not part of everyone too. It's like, listen, I'll sit down with anybody and talk with anybody. We'll find some common ground somehow on something. We can work on those things and we can put the other things aside for a while. So
Is there anything Tim Denson, the mayor, would do differently than Tim Denson, the commissioner?
yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the biggest things is going to be that approach, because the mayor has to bring people together more often. Definitely as a commissioner, you had to also, right? You could never pass anything with a single vote. You couldn't do that by yourself. You always had to have a collection of people to get something done. But even more so, right, as mayor, that becomes even more important. And even outside of the commission, the role of the mayor is really making sure that we're also trying to bring together, the different sectors of our community, the Chamber of Commerce, the folks who work at our hospitals, the school district, which I'm at now, UGA, of course, having to try to bring all those different entities back together to a table. But again, that's something that I kind of love to do, and I think I am good at, is meeting people at different places and be able to try to find that common ground and come together. But that's just going to be an even more important job as mayor than it was as a commissioner.
Well, Tim, I appreciate you so much for accepting my invitation to talk about these things. I think this was a great conversation and helped me get to know you a little bit more. I hope everyone who's listening or watching gets that same feeling. So to the people of Athens and everyone tuning in, leave your thoughts in the comments and let's talk politics.